All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. We have a packed show today. We will continue to talk about the NBA Finals and Game 1 in particular, Finals MVP market. We will talk about the French Open and everything that is going on there with some chaotic results today as we're recording on Wednesday. And then we'll talk a little Stanley Cup Finals and preview the Belmont Stakes at the end. But let's start off with the association. The Celtics are 6.5-point favorites. It is kind of trending down towards like a 6.25. The total is 214.5 in Game 1. Drew, I will be in the building for Game 2 on Sunday in Boston, making the pilgrimage up to TD Garden on the Acela. But what do you think of Game 1, and what do you think of the series in general at the moment? I know we kind of talked about the series pricing dynamics on the last show, but what do you think? How do you think it's going to play out now?
Well, first of all, super jealous you're going to Boston for this beautiful time of year to see the city. And yes, it's going to be an incredible atmosphere, I'm sure. The series pricing we've covered at great length in our last show, and no added thoughts to that. I think the Game 1 pricing is starting to just sort of indicate to you everybody knew Porzingis was going to play. We're not going to see any type of late bump here in favor of the Celtics, and I think the people that were waiting to exercise their opinion on the Mavericks, have finally showing up to the window and getting their Mavericks Game 1 bets down. My opinion of the series is starting to just sort of crystallize beyond any other aspect. Is that the clear and obvious standout for me here now is the Boston offense. Like, I've gone over the X and O's enough, and I'm looking at exactly the way that the spacing that Porzingis brings with the starting five and closing five in particular. And I honestly think that you could see, the record-setting offensive efficiency for an NBA Finals here up against this Mavericks defense. And I know that the Mavericks defense has been a heck of a lot better since the trade deadline, but this is a different beast. The Mavericks are giving up just an absurd amount of three-pointers, particularly in the corner. This is this is like bread and butter. You're giving up the Celtics the opportunity to just fill it up from three with corner threes. Derek White's going to have a huge series in that regard. Drew Holiday's going to have a huge series in that regard. And I think just in general, the fact that the Mavericks gave up a little over 10 threes in the corner in the regular season, and then the playoffs, that's gone up to 11. That's a bad sign for this particular matchup. And Jason Tatum in particular, don't see any defensive stopper on the Mavericks that can match up with him, either from a just a tactical approach or strength standpoint, and with the Porzingis spacing in particular on the floor, his ability to drive and dish, drive and finish, and really create opportunities for himself to snap out of his shooting slump, I think are all real, clear and obvious to me that he's going to be a huge offensive factor in the series. So I'm looking at this through green lens glasses, and all I'm seeing is positives for the side that I already have equity in. So not inclined to bet more on the series, even though we talked about how the price was a little bit favorable for anyone who wants Celtics. And I think this is now just explore fun and interesting ways to make this entertaining and have some higher upside in case the Celtics really are clearly the best.
Yeah, I think this is now one of the rare markets that is being a little infected by public money. We talked about on the last show, it kind of reminds me a little bit. It's not the same because it's not the same level of rort or anything, but it reminds me of Biden-Trump in 2020, where books just could not write money on the favorite. Everything that I've heard is there is just an overwhelming amount of public money on the Mavericks to win this series. And I guess that's also bleeding into the Game 1 price a little bit, and the fact that everyone who would want to back Boston already kind of has backed Boston at larger prices leading up to this. But in terms of how the actual series will play out, I think that the two biggest factors from a matchup perspective that I can glean are, having watched a lot of Mavericks basketball over the past 2 months and having sweated them out to win the West, I think that the two key things with Dallas is, one, when Dallas is on defense, can you drag their big away from the rim? Because I think it just can't be overstated how dominant their defense is when they can just station their big at the rim, and guys like Luka and Kyrie can have a defensive assignment of largely just kind of not ushering, but kind of just directing the play towards the rim. And Dallas haven't had to face a team in the playoffs that can go truly 5 out. I know people say Chet Holmgren like shot high 30% from 3, but Chet, 1, he has a slower release, and then 2, it just seemed like his shot was kind of broken. He shot 6 for 27 in that series against Dallas, and he wasn't providing true spacing. And I thought, though, and also I just don't know what Daigneault was doing, having like Lou Dort constantly in the dunker spot. I thought the most instructive game of this entire playoff run across both conferences was Game 6, OKC Dallas, where I thought that OKC, they solved Dallas's defense and they put up like a 120 plus offensive rating without shooting the lights out, without being amazing on the offensive glass. And they did it because they finally fixed their spacing a bit. And Boston have the best spacing of any team in NBA history. And so I think that Dallas's defense is going to look a lot more mortal with Gafford on the perimeter, with Lively on the perimeter. There's just nowhere to hide. Like they don't have, you can sag off Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday shoots 40% on threes, a decent volume. Like technically by just 3-point percentage, the second worst shooter on Boston is Kristaps Porzingis, who launches them with confidence from 30 feet. So that is one aspect. And then I think the other one that has been discussed a little bit, but not getting as much pub as that element is that just being able to hide your big on not Gafford or Lively when Dallas are on offense. And the fact that Boston will be putting Porzingis or Horford on likely Derek Jones Jr., maybe PJ Washington, and the fact that Luka won't be able to play 2-on-2 and pick and roll going up against the drop big. I think that is just so key because when he does that, it just activates the lob game so much more when you've had Gobert or Chet having to both deter Luka in a drop and then protect against the lob. And it's just too difficult. Luka's just too good. When it's more that it's going to be Luka, maybe he's dragging Porzingis into the action and he's running pick and roll with Derek Jones Jr., but then Derek Jones is rolling into Jason Tatum and Derek Lively by the rim. And that is kind of the trump card of Jason Tatum, and what makes him so special is that guy's 6'8". He's massive. He was able to just turn the tap off of Miles Turner when Miles Turner was killing them on pick and pops in Game 1. And the fact that Tatum is going to be able to defend the center in a way that OKC just couldn't do, because outside of Chet, the sneaky thing with OKC is like their second biggest player in the closing 5 they wanted to have by the end of the series was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's 6'6". Like Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, Kaysen Wallace, Isaiah Joe, all these guys between 6'3" and 6'5", and you just can't put them on a center. So Chet had to guard the center, and the Celtics aren't going to have to do that. And so I think that is just going to make Dallas's offense look a little bit more mortal.
Yes. I love that. Love great breakdown. You mentioned PJ Washington. I don't think that you're going to see Porzingis on PJ Washington. I think you invite PJ Washington to head right to his favorite spot on the court, the left corner, and you do what you've been doing all playoffs, and you make that a smotheringly difficult shot where he has not really been challenged in that much that I have seen in the Western Conference run. Would it surprise you to know the Celtics were the best team in the playoff by margin at defending the left corner 3, allowing just 21%, less than 1 per game. And you turn off that faucet alone, you put a little bit more pressure on Luka. And, you know, most of the kind of what I've heard media wise breaking this game down is, oh, there's, you know, Luka's so tough to defend. You can do this, you can do this. You got to commit this. And then he goes there and okay, all right, fine. Like, yeah, he's tough to defend. He's a big boy. He's outstanding with the ball in his hands, and he is excellent at, you know, creating the contact and then getting either free throws or and one opportunities. And okay, great. Like the mid range is maybe the only soft spot of the entire Celtics defense. And it's not even that soft. But ultimately, like if you want to trade threes, which the Mavericks do for, difficult 2s and or opportunities that dry up in terms of trying to get the corner 3, then, I think you're going to find offense much tougher to come by. And, this is not even really a reach to say that, like, if you have been lulled to sleep by the fact that the Celtics have played nobody to get here, So what? Like, we still don't even really know what their playoff rotation is going to be because they haven't had to go to it yet. And, to that degree, there is uncertainty. There are more moving parts. There are more combinations. There are more solvable ways that, the coaching staff for the Celtics can exercise their advantages in this series if they find themselves in trouble in a given half, in a given game. And so I really am just excited to see what they bring to the table. And I think this has a lot of whiffs to me of when the Mavericks finally broke through and made the Western Conference Finals, and then the Warriors just put their thumb on them. And like this is kind of the way I see this matching up in terms of the strengths of the Celtics against the currently what I perceive as weaknesses in the Mavericks. And I'm full on green team, so you recognize you if you've listened to this podcast for more than 5 minutes at the entire spring, this. But I'm expecting big things from the boys in green.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really comparison and there is just the kind of auto inflation of the superstar when they do break through. And like a lot of really smart people were picking Dallas to beat Golden State in that conference finals. And they got absolutely stomped. And I think that once you get players like Doncic defending out in space, it's just going to look different on defense in particular. And the last thing before we jump to finals MVP, like there is this idea that like Luka is just completely unstoppable. And I think if you ask the average NBA fan, they might tell you that Dallas has a better offense than Boston. And it's just not the case. Like Luka against Minnesota. And I know Luka, like earlier in the playoffs, it's a little bit more difficult to assess because I think he was dealing with the knee a little bit. By the Minnesota series, he was fine. And I don't care that he was limping for parts of game 2 because he was sprinting back on defense whenever he made a shot, and then he's limping back whenever he missed a shot. I'm telling him, he was faking the injury at that point. I'm telling you, there was nothing wrong with Luka. You can't tell me watching him dance with Rudy Gobert at the end of game 2 that he had like a serious knee impediment by that point. And I think that it's been a little bit overblown because when it does look great for Luka, it looks unstoppable. But in the Minnesota series, which is, effectively the masterpiece of his career to date, they had a 114 offensive rating when he was on the court. That would have been a below average offense in the regular season. Now, I know like Minnesota had the #1 defense, so it's impressive. But I think that Boston's defense is going to give Luka more issues than Minnesota's did with just the way that they can switch, the fact that they don't have to go as big and have two traditional bigs on the floor. And so like Dallas were like a plus 1.6 with Luka on the court in that series. They blew out Minnesota because they destroyed the non-Luka minutes, which I don't think anyone's like terrified when the non-Luka minutes against the Boston Celtics. So I think Luka's the best player in the series. He's amazing. He might be the best player on the planet, but it's not like he is a ticket to like a 125 offensive rating every time that he steps on the court. And he wasn't last series, even as incredible.
125 offensive rating, for those of you who are not familiar, would be a record. You know who has the record, Jay?
It'd be the Boston Celtics.
The Boston Celtics.
Yeah.
The greatest offense. Weirdly, that's being kind of left out of the discussion. I'm really confused because you look at it's not even just that they set the record this year. They freaking destroyed it, right? Like think about a year where like Tom Brady broke the touchdown pass record. It was well known. In fact, it was extremely well covered. Peyton Manning comes back a couple years later, breaks it, and he's like, "Oh, that was the entire focus of the question." Like, "Oh my God, this is a historically good offense." That is what the Boston Celtics are this regular season. Why is this being overlooked?
Yeah, I think for people who are just like straight up picking Dallas, I think it's kind of inarguable that Boston has the better offense. Boston has a better defense, and they have home court. It's like, what? How's Dallas like your pick at 50-50 to win the series? I just don't understand it at all.
I think they have the intangibles.
Well, it's just people are obsessed with who has the best player in the series, and it's fine. Like, how did LeBron James go against the KD Warriors when LeBron James was the best player in that series, and they were down 3-0 and were odds on to get swept? I think
it was funny on that example specifically. You remember what happened after that series? Well, I guess Kevin Durant's the best player then.
Yeah, right.
Like that was there was a rush to revisionist history, which he wasn't, but there was a rush to revisionist history. I use Darko as my go-to metric to evaluate player impact.
Tatum was above Luka there, right?
Tatum is above Luka, and not just above him, but he's been clearly above him for now 3 seasons. Even with this current uptick, if you upweight his recent performances, he's still above him. Do you think there is scope that we come out of this and people are just like, wow, now that he's got a ring, I look at him different? Like there's potentially a big Tatum correction coming if I'm just kind of looking at the data objectively.
Yeah, I think with Tatum, and it ties into Finals MVP where he's a -120 favorite. Doncic is second favorite at 2-1. I think there is a monstrous chance your winner is one of those two players. I've got Tatum. I think he should be like 77 to 80% of Boston's equity. Brown 15% range, then field the rest. And people are like, I know people are like making the case for Kristaps or Derek White. It's just so hard for anyone else to win MVP when Tatum plays the minutes that he does and just the counting stats that he's going to accrue just by virtue of being on the court and getting the usage that he does. So I think if I were to make a bet in the series, it would be Tatum, but I would rather just back Boston at -210. I think that math works out better. But with Tatum, I think it's just hard for people to kind of reconcile when a player is like, I think Doncic is a better player than Tatum, but Doncic's advantage is entirely on offense. And it's just harder for people to conceptualize the gap being shrunk between players when one player is so much better on defense than the other. Like Jason Tatum can both be like a shutdown perimeter defender and guard the opposing center. Like he's a very rare, unique defensive player. And I think we're going to see Luka's defensive failings. Like as someone who's sweating out every Mavs game in their run through the West, like there are stretches where Doncic just plays with zero effort whatsoever. And he takes off possessions on defense and he has no lateral movement. And like in the playoffs, he's generally a lot more engaged. But like when you get Doncic out in space, like he can't move laterally. Like his strength on defense is that he knows where to be. He's gigantic and he's big and he's quick hands and he's very smart. But this is the team that was built to really stress him out on defense, where he is going to have to guard in space. He's going to have to like stay in front of Jaylen Brown's quickness. Tatum's going to go at him as well. Drew Holiday is going to be like back cutting. So I think that a lot of Doncic's flaws will be exposed in this series. But what do you think about that? And what do you think of the Finals MVP market?
Well, let's talk about the Luka price first. I think the Mavericks have roughly a 20% chance of winning the Finals, which means Luka plus 200 is about the worst, most poisonous price that I can possibly imagine. Like betting plus 200 on that is absurd to me. And I think if you again, like I think every bet, these are the times when you wish you were a book, right? You wish you were a book for this series because you're writing Doncic plus 200 MVP bets more than any other MVP bet probably. You're writing Mavericks series ticket prices at plus 180 when the series by series math tells you you're going to have an advantage on that. I mean, the game by game math is telling you that. And so it to me, I just am blown away that that's the price for Doncic. And granted, like if they ultimately win, like is he going to get the MVP? One, almost certainly. Like it would take something very, very unusual to happen, like an injury to him and Kyrie then carrying this team, or something else insane happening to get you there. But guess what? If Doncic gets injured, my probability goes from like 20% to win the series to like 2. So I think like this is realistically like Tatum as a proxy bet for the Celtics to win if you're feeling frisky, and I definitely have no appetite for any of the Celtics down the list there. I will just say that that I'm still kind of scratching my head about this because the Celtics offense is what stands out the most clearly, but they have so many plus defensive players, man. Like the point, and they're plus defense at premium positions. Like you mentioned with Tatum being able to, versatility in terms of who he can guard. Like you have elite point of attack defense from either Drew Holiday or Derek White. Like the Bucks would kill for one of those guys, and ironically, they had one of those guys. But the idea that the Doncic is going to just be explosive and out otherworldly offensively in this series, I just can't get there. And I feel like I almost I did step in the water a little bit this week on some other media, but I almost kind of want to get in the hot take, in front of the hot take of Tatum's better than Doncic, because I feel like that's where we are headed, as this could be just a complete conclusive Celtics are the best team in the NBA this year, and they put an exclamation point on a title run.
Yep, no, I'm with you on all those points. I think, look, I think that the most likely outcome is that Boston just kind of destroys them, and that it's a shortish series, that it's 4-1, or that it's a comfortable 4-2 that is never really feels in that much doubt. But, you know, we'll see. Luka is very good. Dallas have been incredible since the trades. But I also think, like, you can't entirely just throw out the 44 games before the trade deadline that Luka played, and they were like a +1 with Luka on the court. Like, I don't think you can entirely throw that out. When the Mavs have had, their 4 best players who have been on the team the whole season, Luka, Kyrie, Derek Lively, and Derek Jones Jr. For the whole season, when those 4 guys have been on the court, the Mavs are like a +3. Like, it's not super inspiring when you're going up against this Boston team that, you know, statistically checks every box. And you know, we'll see. Maybe there is some room for weirdness, but I think this is a mismatch.
You know what part of the series I'm looking forward to the most? Celtics, just in general, if this plays to market expectation, Celtics winning game 1, doing well enough at home in game 2 that Jason Kidd tacks back into his inner demon and goes with his weird love for Maxi Kleber as a closing player on this team, because that iteration is, you know, if they end up tacking away from you know, the big on the floor, which has been so critical to them succeeding to this point in the West, into what feels comfortable and feels like, well, this worked in the past. Like, there is an adjustment potential during the course of this series where you see extensive Kleber minutes, and I'm waiting with bated breath for that to happen, because that is just going to be series over.
And this is the thing, is like the Mavs, they just play so many guys, and I learned this the hard way, having sweated this team out. Like Kleber, Josh Green, Jaden Hardy, like Exum is so limited on offense, even though I think they should probably play him a little bit more. Even like Derek Jones, Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington, like these guys just have never been that good in their careers. And I get that it's a little bit of a cheat code playing with Luka Doncic, like it was playing with Peak Harden, where your role is so simplified that your weaknesses don't get so accentuated if you just have to kind of stand there and hit shots and then play defense. But at the same time, like, I think those specialist players are going to have to do more in this series. Like, Derek Jones is going to have to do stuff off the dribble, and Gafford is going to have to learn how to play in the short roll to stay on the court. And I just don't like, this Boston team is so incredibly well-rounded. They're so deep. And here's the thing, is like, everyone always focuses on the fact that, you know, Tatum being the best player on a title team, and Tatum is like the 6th or 7th best player in the league or whatever. The way to look at this team is the fact that I think inarguably the 5th best player on this team is Drew Holiday, who literally last year, going into the playoffs, was the 2nd best player on the 1 seed and title favorite. And now he's the 5th best player on the Celtics. And we just don't focus enough on the fact that, yeah, the Celtics didn't look amazing at times in the Eastern Conference playoffs, but it's like, I think Kristaps Porzingis is their 2nd best player, and he didn't play. And they were still romping to a +11 net rating throughout the playoffs. So I think if Porzingis stays healthy and just gives them like 25 minutes a game, I think they're going to roll. I don't think it's like, you know, I don't think they're like 95% to win the series or anything, but I think they are between 75 and 80% to win the series, and the market doesn't reflect that at the moment. And certainly hope it comes to fruition, as we suspect it will. No locks, but I would be stunned if Porzingis is healthy and there's not, like, you know, any series for a team as good as Dallas, they can win any series with shooting variance. Like Miami against Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, they shot 43% from 3, and Boston shot 30% from 3. And Tatum sprains his ankle on Gabe Vincent, the first play of Game 7, and the Heat, they win that series. Like, I think it's going to take like weird stuff like that, though, for Dallas to overcome the Celtics. All right, let's pivot to Roland Garros, and the field continues to narrow as we draw closer to champions being crowned at the French Open. Drew, find out who advances on the clay courts of Roland Garros by streaming matches on Peacock today through Sunday. All right, let's start on the women's side. chaos reigns on Wednesday as we're recording. Sabalenka out, Rybakina out. But the first semi-final, Iga Swiatek minus 700 to beat Coco Gauff, who's plus 475. And then Jasmine Paolini is plus 110 against Mirra Andreeva, minus 135. Which upset were you more surprised by between Sabalenka and Rybakina going down?
Oh, 100% Sabalenka. And not because of the quality of the opponent, but because I didn't know that she was very clearly dealing with something, some clear illness. I have been kind of stuck working / prepping for the finals / watching the men's tennis. And so I have not heard the Sabalenka press. I don't know what she's on record saying was going wrong with her. But watching that match, like, she pretty clearly had some sort of illness, some viral illness, something just looked like she needed to throw up for a good 2 hours. And it was like, yeah, okay, well, if you're up against an opponent who's on form that day and you can't, kind of keep it together physically, you're in trouble. And she she lost. And, even until it was over, I didn't know Andreeva had the, kind of the killer, punch to land the final fatal blow, but she did, and that was very cool. So cool for Andreeva. But the major takeaway of today's results were we probably saw the French Open final about a week ago, and it was Osaka versus Iga Swiatek. And with that result in the books, I think this is pretty clearly just an Iga title number 4, and I know she has a meaningful opponent, a slam winner in Coco Gauff, American Coco Gauff, to handle here in the semifinals. And so it's a long way from finished here. But I thought Coco Gauff brought the most correct, or at least strategically wise game to the table in Rome when she played Iga last time out. And Iga handled it, absorbed it, redirected it, waited for the end of the set, flipped the switch, and put her away. And if you are telling me that was as good as it can get on this type of surface and this speed, then I have very little hope that you're going to be able to all of a sudden find another gear at this stage of this tournament, especially with the way Iga's playing. My goodness gracious. We talked about it on the preview of the French Open broadly, but Iga was at her peak ELO as far as quality of play coming into this tournament. It's gone up. Like, she is playing so phenomenally well. And now that the conditions are kind of more in tune with what, kind of suits her game, i.e. the roof is open and the ball is bouncing a little bit higher. Everybody is just prey at this point. And I hope Coco, kind of does us proud as Americans and, gives us a fighting effort. But I would say her chances to win are less than 10% by my numbers. And so if you want to have a bet, I don't hate betting on Iga. And honestly, the fair price for the final between Paolini or Andreeva against Iga is going to be minus 2,500-ish. It's going to be a monster number. And I think we also maybe talked about this a little bit before the tournament. Like, would you do better off laying the price for Iga or doing a money line rollover game by game? Ironically, you would have been better off just waiting to bet her live against Osaka. But if you had done the money line rollover game by game, you're not going to get close to that pre-flop price, because the final price isn't going to be anywhere close to what it would be if it was Sabalenka or Rybakina. Now, I don't really want to hold too much against Rybakina for not getting it done on clay. Like, this isn't her surface. Like, she needs to, kind of tune up and be right for Wimbledon. And she'll be a very formidable opponent there. Probably my favorite. But Sabalenka was playing so well. She had yet to drop a single set in Grand Slam play to this point in the year before losing second set to Andreeva today. And, there were opportunities for her to come through. So tough break for her. But, I think it was just a matter of time before Iga ultimately took her down anyway. So, the Paolini Andreeva match is going to be fun. I don't have a strong lean there yet. Have not broken down those numbers, but very cool to see Paolini succeed after what has been a really cool season for her. Breakthrough performance from her in Dubai, where she wins her first kind of 1,000 title, which was a big deal, and a great breakthrough for Andreeva. She's 17 years old. Great. Love her coach, love her team. She has exactly the right spirit to be, sort of a future, kind of top tier contender on the women's tour, year in, year out, slam in, slam out. And to be at her age and to get to this point, having come through Sabalenka, is freaking awesome, regardless of whatever limitations Sabalenka had.
Saw that Iga to beat Coco 2-0. It's like minus 225. And I know it's not, but it feels like 95% that will occur. Do you think that that is a bet?
You know why you feel that it feels like 95%? Because that's happened almost every single time they've played.
Yeah.
In particular, every time they've played with like any type of surface advantage Iga. I think in the head-to-head historically, if you are unfamiliar with this, I believe Iga is 10-1 with the 1 win coming in Cincinnati last year pre-US Open. And the 10 wins for Iga were all 2-0 from memory.
Right. Well, yeah. Minus 225 reflects what 70% or whatever. So that's not quite 100%. Kind of vibes of the Iga Coco thing reminds me of Federer Roddick, where Federer was like, I think he was like 21-2 against Roddick or something ridiculous. So yeah, I think Coco might be up against it. I'm with you. All right. Yeah. Men's side, we have perhaps our de facto final as well before the final in this one with Carlos Alcaraz against Jannik Sinner. Alcaraz minus 165 favorite, Jannik plus 135. Now, there were kind of health concerns about both of these guys coming into the tournament. What have you seen from those two with their varying degrees of readiness for this one? And do you think there's a bet to be made?
I'm really scratching my head on this. I've come full circle to just Sinner's the best player. He's shown more form this year. He's the dog price. Just take it. I don't think it's going to be an especially significant stake for me, but and it's not an especially good reason to take the dog price. But here's kind of the information dump, and I'll let you decide, or let me help support my case, or tell me to walk away from the table. One of the two. Alcaraz has played no one. The times we saw him somewhat tested in round 2 against Jesper de Jong, he was unable to manifest much in terms of an advantage with his forehand. He comes through, finally plays someone in Tsitsipas yesterday. I backed Tsitsipas stupidly, and Tsitsipas was running around like a chicken with his head cut off, could not make a decision on where he wanted to attack him on court, just really wanted to do flourishing, kind of just acrobatic maneuvers, and was less interested in kind of executing a tactical approach and more interested in just let's see if I can make some wacky shots here, because I'm lost. And like, he was communicating, telegraphing lost throughout that whole match. Had a chance to kind of level things with a very brief moment where he was very brief period of quality play in the second set, and Alcaraz handled it. He made his level dropped a bit, but ultimately he kind of self-corrected and then just pulled away. And to your Federer Roddick analogy, the Alcaraz Tsitsipas record is starting to manifest similarly. I think this is now 6-0 with none of them being especially competitive. And that's I don't know that you can take as much as I was hoping you could out of that match. Now, Sinner, on the other hand, he looked to me to be a little bit physically weary early in this tournament, and has completely kind of steadied the ship there, and has gotten better as the tournament has gone on. He is playing some of his best clay tennis that I have seen from him ever to this point in the tournament. And while he again has not been tested by anyone in terms of quality, he definitely does have kind of world #1 pedigree. Now he has it actually, and coming off of his slam win in Australia, I think is going to be a tough opponent. Now, in a vacuum, if both guys come out and they're relatively A game, Alcaraz is the better clay player. And that is kind of the only reason that I think you can support him being the favorite right now. So I would look and kind of wait to see how this market develops a bit. My intuition is that the market is going to come in on Sinner, just because you've seen more from him this year than you have from Alcaraz. And and Alcaraz's comments are very flattering to Sinner in terms of his quality of play. Like, Alcaraz knows this is going to be a different test than a guy that he's basically been picking on for 2 years in Tsitsipas. So I think this is going to be an epic I think it's going to be a war, and I am inclined to take the dog price. And actually, the real kind of strategy is probably just to take the dog price and look for in-play trading opportunities, because this going one way, going 3-0 either way, feels very unlikely to me. This has 5 sets written all over it.
Okay. Yeah, I think the difficulty is that, one, the kind of some of the health concerns about Sinner in particular, and then 2, the fact that like these guys have played each other once in their careers on clay, and that was in 2022 at Umag, and that was back when I feel like I was losing a lot of money on Alcaraz, where he's like dropping these random matches against Tommy Paul and stuff. He wasn't in amazing form, so that is a bit of a just creates some uncertainty that we haven't seen these guys match up on clay and how their games will play against each other on clay. Jannik's won 2 of the past 3 that they've played. I think just with the kind of, seems like there is an extreme amount of uncertainty for this match, just hearing you talk about it. And from what I know, in terms of, you know, these are probably the 2 best players in the world, and they're going head to head in the Grand Slam semifinal, and no one really knows what's going to happen or how it's going to play out. And so I think that kind of uncertainty might breed in play opportunities where you'll be able to see what these guys look like against each other on clay. And then you can bet it after you kind of gain some of that information. I think back as well to last year when Alcaraz was in the French Open semi, and some of the in-play stuff there where like it was pretty clear at a certain point in that match against Novak that Alcaraz like could not move physically, and he was still like a heavy favorite to hold serve in individual games. It's like, this guy's not a favorite to do anything at the moment. Like, he's just completely cooked. So maybe that is the angle is waiting to see how this plays out in the early stages, and then getting involved.
Yeah. So one other thing on the health thing. So the reason to stay away from Alcaraz, besides price, which is still and remains absurd, was because of his weaponry, particularly his forehand. I still haven't seen it. I'm still not seeing what he had when he was peak on clay last year and when he won Wimbledon last year. Like it's still not quite there. And that's because he has an elbow forearm injury. The concern for injury around Sinner was he was going to have this marathon match and withdraw like Djokovic, because the risk of a long-term injury was real. Chronic injury to hip is real. Like, you have a 5-setter, you feel a niggle, boom, done, bye. Right. So there was no inclination to take a price on Sinner for that reason, in my opinion. Well, Sinner hasn't had the marathon match. In fact, he's barely been tested. So I think realistically, this is a decent opportunity. Guys, again, like when we talked, what was the first time we previewed French Open? Like April, maybe, like Monte Carlo happened, or maybe it was after Miami. What, kind of like in that time window before we had kind of any inclination that Sinner was dealing with the hip. He would have been my pick. Like you're getting this price on the best player. Like, we haven't seen Carlos do anything all year. Like, Djokovic was a huge question mark. Like, like these he was pretty clearly the guy, and you were getting a decent price. And I didn't end up staking much on it just because wanted to see how he played through clay season. He picks up the hip. We think he may ultimately not play. There were plenty of reports swirling that he wasn't going to play. He elects to play, and he has really dealt with no adversity to this point. So he might just win, and I'm not going to be shocked. So he's the best player in the world. He could win his first 2 slams back to back to start 2024, and I think we would all be like, yep, okay. At the same time, Alcaraz, you said it, he's the second best player in the world, and the margin is narrow. And Alcaraz is slightly better on clay just with his tool set when he's got them all. And maybe he does have the forehand, and he just hasn't shown us. That's possible too. But the in-play angle is really where it's at. And I guess the key for me is, if you are watching Alcaraz and he's hitting winners with his forehand that are not scooping, but are like just legitimately carrying with topspin, then his elbow's fine and he's going to be a problem.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And it's always difficult pricing in kind of injuries that you don't entirely know about. Like, for instance, like last playoffs in the NBA, like Malcolm Brogdon comes in with an elbow injury, and then he starts airballing shots by 5 feet. It's like, all right, well, his elbow is completely gone, and he's done. Whereas with this, it's like we have an idea of an injury with both of these guys that may not ever manifest. I kind of always skew to while baking in some scope that it will, just defaulting and largely heavily weighting to the fact that these guys will probably be fine. Now, with Alcaraz might be a bit different because he hasn't shown, hasn't proven that level of health. But again, that's another reason potentially to get a look in the first set at how he's playing, to your point. All right, Indy 500 winner Joseph Newgarden looks to keep his momentum going this weekend as he battles the world's fastest drivers at Road America. Tune in Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock to see who takes the checkered flag in the fine state of Wisconsin. All right, quick Stanley Cup Finals chat before we jump into the Belmont Stakes. Game 1 is on Saturday. The Oilers are plus 115 and the Panthers are minus 135. In game 1, it's the exact same price for the series. Do you have any bets on either this game or on the series?
Sitting tight on Oilers. Hope they come through in one of these two games to start the series in Florida. And yeah, would love to kind of see how the market treats them if they win, because teams, people does feel like the market likes to treat the Oilers, as heavier favorites when they have front running status. So yeah, I'm hopeful that they take it 1-1 back to Edmonton, but I don't see any clear and obvious advantages for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fairly liquid market, and as much as I'm kind of questioning whether there is any liquidity in anything, looking at these Celtics prices, but with this, I think the book on this series is these teams are, effectively even on neutral, and then the home ice is tipped to Florida, and that's how you get your series price, and that's how you get your game 1 price. I think that there are some misconceptions about the Oilers in that I think that a lot of people have been skeptical of this team because, their style doesn't work in the playoffs. Like, their style looked pretty bloody good against Dallas, where they basically cooked Dallas. I thought they were the better team in 5 out of the 6 games, and ironically, the one game where they did get really outplayed was game 6. Now there's a chance that Florida could exploit the fact that the Oilers don't have amazing depth and the Florida do have better depth, but at the same time, the Stars had just as much depth, and the Oilers were able to destroy, well, not destroy, but they were able to have the advantage in that series. We'll see how the Panthers penalty kill goes as well, which has been amazing these playoffs, but it's a different animal going up against this Oilers power play, which is just about the best that I've ever seen. I don't think, for me, there is no way to bet into this series or this game price. I think that the much more vulnerable market is betting into the Conn Smythe, which is interesting, just how the market divvies up equity. I think that the two main things here now to think about are, and as we look at the prices here, Connor McDavid is a 2-1 favorite, and then Sergei Bobrovsky and Alexander Barkov are both 4-1. I think that goal that McDavid scored to open up game 6 against Dallas, which was, just peak McDavid, just it might go down as the most important goal of his career to date, given the stakes, and a goal that perhaps only he could have scored. I think that shifted a lot of Conn Smythe equity more than, a single goal in the first period of a game 6 will typically, because it just reminded and reinforced to everyone in a way that hadn't really happened for much of the playoffs to date that, oh yeah, Connor McDavid is maybe the greatest player of all time. And I think that he is now around 80% of Edmonton's equity. And it's funny because we've got this big bet on Evan Bouchard at, I can't remember, it's triple digits, and it feels like that bet has drifted because of how dominant McDavid's position is. But then he takes a step back. It's like, oh no, it's actually shortened because they've advanced through 2 series since then. But I think McDavid is certainly the heavy favorite. And I think there is still some meat on the bone. You get some plus 220 about McDavid. Like I said, I think he's 80% of their equity. And then the other thing is that with Florida, I just think that the market should be a lot flatter than it is at the moment with Florida because no one has created separation. Bobrovsky, I think, is vastly too short. Like, he's being priced as an equal favorite at the moment. I think he's less than 20% of Florida's equity. Like, I would barely back. I wouldn't back Bobrovsky at plus 400 if you told me that Florida have won the cup and they have to win the cup. So it's like you're going to almost double his price. I can't get anywhere close on Bobrovsky. I think if the vote were held today, I think Barkov would definitely win, but he doesn't have much of a gap. on these other guys. And if I were to make one bet at the moment, it would be on Kachuk at 6-1. I think he is more like 30% of Florida's equity. And so 30% of Florida's equity. So I think that he should be more like, plus 500, that type of range. So not much meat on the bone, but he is their leading point scorer. He's got a 2-point gap on Barkov. He's got same pedigree as Barkov. He was the hero last playoff run. So Kachuk at 6-1 would be my bet. And then I would still monitor Verhaeghe and Forsling, who are at much bigger prices. I don't think they're out of it entirely yet.
Yeah, I like the way you kind of described it, which is the Panthers are much more of a flat earth. So if you're going to attack any market and you want to attack the Conn Smythe, definitely shop Panthers, because I'm with you. I feel like if it's Oilers, it's kind of cooked now. Like clear first place, Connor McDavid, clear second place to Bouchard, but the gap is big enough, at least in the minds of the voter, that I don't know how you close it.
Yep. I mean, the way that it gets closed is that, like, McDavid statistically, he doesn't have he probably doesn't have the best case statistically right now. And one, that's kind of a problem for Bouchard, that it's like the case probably isn't going to get that much better, and he would lose the vote. Certainly, if it were held today, McDavid would win. But at the same time, like, if McDavid gets neutralized by, Barkov and Forsling and this amazing Florida defensive core, if he doesn't play that well in this series and it's more like Bouchard and Draisaitl are doing more of the damage. Like if you're on Bouchard like I am, I think you want Draisaitl to have a really good series, because then Draisaitl kind of dilutes McDavid's equity. And then people will look and be like, all right, we've got these two amazing forwards. So they cancel each other out, but they do dilute each other a bit. And meanwhile, we have Evan Bouchard, who might be having the greatest postseason that a defenseman has ever had. He is the guy now. So that's kind of what I'm cheering for, is Draisaitl and Bouchard, because like if Bouchard is just like playing McDavid to a draw from here, he's going to lose. Like he either needs to somehow overtake McDavid on his own bat, which is very difficult, or he needs a little kind of weird help from Draisaitl to kind of flatten the playing surface a little bit, which I think is probably more viable. So that is what I'm cheering for. But at current prices, Kachuk, I think, is the bet, and just monitoring Verhaeghe and Forsling, recognizing that the Barkov is the most likely Panther to win. All right, let's go to the Belmont Stakes, Drew. What are you looking at in this market? Have you made any bets?
I have a little bit of take on Sierra Leone, the 9. I think he is the class of this field in terms of quality horse. And again, if you're not kind of keyed in on what matters for the Belmont Stakes, number one, it's not happening in Belmont this year. It's happening in Saratoga. Apparently the first of 2 years that it's happening in Saratoga. So if you missed your chance to see the very rare Belmont Stakes at Saratoga in 2024, you could see it in 2025. And I would be lying if I said I hadn't been doing some logistical homework on how to make that happen. But yes, they're in Saratoga. Which is still in New York. And it's a really good field. We have 3 new Todd Pletcher runners. We have not seen any of these 3 in the Triple Crown to this point. The 5 Antiquarian, the 7 Protective, and the 10 Mindframe are all being brought into this race by Todd. Mindframe stands out between those 3 as sort of the key obvious newcomer of interest, ridden by Irad Ortiz Jr., drawn into the 10, and has early speed. So Mindframe is going to be on the pace, and we've seen some in particular, some practice snippets. You remember Fierceness, the big old favorite in the Kentucky Derby?
Remember you talking about Fierceness?
The unbeatable Fierceness, yeah. Well, Mindframe has been training with Fierceness, and he's been romping him. So there's definitely some signal there that this horse is ready to pop. And there's a lot of sharps who I think are key on Mindframe. I think Mindframe can come in second, but I think Sierra Leone has enough quality to run him down. The key news for Sierra Leone, out of the 9, he has been rested since the Derby in terms of racing. He's been training. He has a new jockey, Flavian Pratt, and he has a new bit, which supposedly is going to help him run a straighter line down the home stretch instead of the kind of the wandering path he took in the Kentucky Derby that cost him that race. And so I'm hopeful that Sierra Leone who is a deep closer, can close on this field. It looks like we're going to have a fast pace with some of the new blood in this race, and The one sees the gray, the Preakness winner is a toss for me. The 2 Resilience is a toss. Mystic Dan, I think, is out of gas. He's a toss in the 3. The Wine Steward in 4 is a toss. Antiquarian is interesting to me because if any of the Todd Pletcher mind frame pops, Antiquarian the 5 could very clearly come in second. Dornoch is a toss. Protective is a toss. Our old friend Anna Marie is running in the 8, and I'm a little bit conflicted here because I watched the tape a couple times on Anna Marie's Kentucky Derby, and he had a very, very poor break in otherwise a very fine race. And I think Anna Marie has to be in the mix to hit the board. I don't think has enough closing speed to hold off Sierra Leone, but I like 9/8. I like 9/10, and I like 8, 9, 10 in some some trifecta pools.
Okay, Anna Marie, jockeyed by the great Florent Giroux, not to be confused with our soon arriving striker to LAFC, Olivier Giroud. But no, that's good to hear, Drew. So Sierra Leone, 9-5, the favourite and your pick. All right, we are done for now. We'll be back on an episode dropping Tuesday morning. Hopefully we have a 2-0 Celtics lead in pocket. Just don't screw around, Boston. Just the quote that Irish people say, the quote is mind your work. Just mind your work, Boston. 48 minutes of focus, locked in, no lapses. If you're locked in for 48 minutes, they cannot beat you. They cannot beat us. So just take care of business. And hopefully we'll be there to recap it Tuesday morning. But for now, don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll speak to you soon.